Hello everyone, welcome back yet to another lab. Today we will talk a little bit about some administrative commands related to Linux. Usually we need to know certain details about our system other than the host name or the username or the time and the calendar. These basic commands are sometimes not enough. So in this case, we need to try to get additional details about our system. In addition, we will get to use some commands related to user management. So let us start with one of the most used commands when you are trying to run any utility. For example, apt-get update. This command requires administrative rights, as you can see here. Through an error, it told me that the file you are trying to modify is locked. So we resolved this issue previously by running the sudo command, if you remember. So we just type sudo and then apt-get update, and of course apt get update, and this will work for sure. The command will run and it will check for the latest packages, but there is another way. So as we mentioned in our lecture, sudo is actually a group of users that have administrative rights. So the other way is to actually use the actual root user, and some Linux admins don't recommend doing that. We are going to learn how to enable this user, how to use that user, switch to that user, and then it is up to you whether you want to follow this method or not. It's just we are trying to be aware that there is another way of executing root commands. So in this case, if I try to use su is switch user, and try to switch to the root user. The root user is the user I was talking about. This is the admin user of the system. If I try to type any password, it will not work because I never actually switched to this user and I never set a password for this user. So what is the solution in this case? We need to update the password for the sudo user. In order to update the password, it is very simple. I just need to type sudo password. Password is the command used to update the password. Then I need to specify the name of the user. Now, since I'm part of the sudo group, that means the current user, which any user that is set up with the system. In this case, of course, you have to pay attention. I'm running Ubuntu desktop. If you run Ubuntu server, by default, you have to set the root user name and password, okay? But for my case, since I'm planning to use the system as a normal user, the system itself, Linux, added me to the sudo group by default, okay? So I have permission to run the sudo command. In this case, when I run sudo password root, I actually have permission to set the password for the root user, which is one of the admin users of the system. So in this case, I'm going to set any password for this user. And then it will tell me that the password has been updated successfully. Now the password command, once you set a password for the user, you effectively enable that user. So the root user now is enabled. If I type su, of course I need to specify the user, so su root, and then I will type the password which I just set. Now suddenly I became a root user, and you can see my prompt has changed. Now I can see the name of the user root mentioned in addition to the machine name. Okay, and of course the pound sign we mentioned before, that it indicates that any command I'm going to type now is effectively a root command or a command with elevated privileges. Okay. So this is nice. Okay, I'm a root user. Now I can run, for example, apt git upgrade without any need to type sudo. And I can, for example, okay, I'll tell it yes, please upgrade this package, whatever. So this is one of the advantages. Now I'm going to stick with this user for now. I'm going to keep using it until there is a need to switch back to the normal user. Okay. So other than enabling the root user, you might need to know the running processes in the system. Effectively, there is a task manager, okay, which can be used to monitor the system, but it is that is GUI based, but it is good to know that there is actually a command called top. Top command will show me that the top running processes, I think around the first 20 or something, okay. So I can see here total running processes 231, sleeping 230, for example, stopped zombie processes, that means it is we can say stuck. We have the CPU utilization. It's like if you go to Windows and right click on the taskbar and select task manager, it is similar in concept to that, okay. So that's good. Now this is not all the processes, as you can see. If I use the arrow keys, I can see more details left and right, and then down I can see, you can see the number, it's incrementing. I'm going down the list until I reach the end. Okay, and you can see there are many processes actually running on the system. Okay, what if I want to see all the processes at the same time? If you type top-b, then it will display everything in one page. Okay, there is no need to use the arrow keys to scroll anymore. Another way would be to, if for example, I think I'm running Firefox here. Let me open Firefox. This is just an example of a process that is running. Okay, if I want to know something called the process ID of Firefox, I can type top-b, then grep Firefox. In this case, I will filter on the Firefox process ID. If I make note of this ID, 19584, I can use another command that is kill. Kill basically is like in task in Windows, so I can kill 19584. And then if you pay attention to Firefox here, you can see that Firefox now has exited because the process, I killed the process responsible of running the program. Okay, so this is the top command. Another command that might be of use is df, which displays disk information. You can see here, of course, it is now showing in kilobytes, which might be a little bit not human friendly. So if I include the flag -h, now I can see my storage details, 5 GB used by the entire disk. We can say it is 5 GB. Boot is 1.7. Dev 940 MB, and so on and so forth. So of course it is very useful to know what is the percentage usage of your disk. In my case, it is 57%. Okay, so this is about df and about top. Another very important command, which is actually, it's not a command, it's basically knowing how to view the log of the system, because it might be useful for you as a system admin. So in this case, if you want to view the log, we can use, for example, nano editor, and if we can go to var, if I remember correctly, log, and then syslog. Okay, so this file will contain the latest logs of the system, and you can see, of course, here is the date time stamp, the machine name, the process ID, as mentioned before. Like if I scroll, maybe we'll see the process ID of Firefox mentioned here, and then the log message. Okay, so this is just a quick breakdown of the log file. Of course, just knowing that this log file exists in this directory and how to view it is very important. Okay, now if I remember correctly, I think other than df log top. I think these are the main commands. And there is one command remaining, which is the IP address. Of course, it is one of the most important tasks to figure out the IP address of the current system. So in this case, if I want to know the IP address of my current system, we have IP addr then show. This will display all links, we call them. Links are if you have multiple interfaces. That means you have a Wi-Fi, you have a loopback. Loopback is a local link. You have maybe Ethernet card. All the links will be displayed here, whether there is an IP address assigned to them or not. Okay. Then what you can do actually, instead of seeing all these details, if you make note of the adapter, for my case it is ENP0S1. How did I know? Because this is, we can say, it is not for internet connectivity, these two. Usually ENP LO, of course, loopback. That means it is just local to my machine. And so what is remaining is this this interface, basically. Another way, which might be also easy, if I type IP addr show and then I filter on inet. In this case, it will display anything that is related to an interface that is for network connectivity. So in this case, we have all of these, and just taking a guess, I can say that this is actually my current IP address, right? inet, then I have this IP address. This is the IP address of the, I think, the gateway. Okay. So in this case, we were able to know multiple information about our IP configuration. Okay, so this is the IP address show. Of course, it has a lot of many usages. For example, you can enable, disable interfaces, change your IP address, but we will not cover all of these today. Okay, so I basically, we ran through, let's say, the common. Okay, we're still not fully aware of the full capabilities of these commands, okay? But we at least know that these commands exist, and as I mentioned before, the purpose of this course is not to be to be introduced to the Linux operating system first, and then later it is up to you to actually get to learn the advanced usages of these commands and how to manage the system in details. Okay, we're just getting started basically as system administrators for Linux. Okay, so this is regarding the most basic administration commands. Now, one of the common tasks of a system admin is to add users to the system. So in this case, we have user add command. User add command can be used to add another user. In this case, we have to include the -d or -m-d, which tells the user add command to specify the home directory. Each user, each regular user, needs to have a home directory. Actually, it's not required, but it is best practice, especially if that user is going to be creating files and going to add anything to the system. So in this case, I'll call him test user, and then after specifying -m and -d, I can specify the -s, which is the shell. For me, I'm going to use bin bash for this user, and then if I add -u capital, that means I'm asking user add to create a group for that user with the same name, which might be useful in some cases. And finally, we need to mention the actual username. Okay. Of course, you can specify the full name and other details for the user, but for me, it's I don't care about these things. Just adding the user is enough. Now, of course, if you try to run this command without sudo, it will ask you for password. So in this case, because I'm already en route, it actually ran the command. Now, how can I know if this user was added properly? I can type cat and then go to etc password, and then I can grep that user, test user, and I can see that, of course, this file contains a record or multiple records actually of all the users added to the system. In this case, test user, the password for this test user is X. That means it's stored in the shadow passwords. And then the user ID is 1001, the user group 1002, the home directory for this user is home test user, and the shell is bin bash, okay, or bash. Now, of course, this user is added, but he's not yet enabled. There is no password for this user. So in order to change the password, again, password, test user, and then I'll type a new password, 123 for example, just to save time. Okay, again. Okay, password updated successfully. Now what I can do is basically, in order to now get out of root, now we are done with root. I don't think we are going to need it anymore. All you need to do is just type exit. Exit will take you back to your previous shell. Then all you need to do is, again, switch user to test user. And this effectively will ask you for the password for the test user. And once I hit enter, of course, if I go to home, we can see now we are in test user. Okay, what can we do? Of course, ls, the home directory of test user is empty. We can, for example, create a file. Okay, and then I'm going to exit from this user. Now, if I want to check what's happening, I can go to, I can type basically sudo ls-r of /home, and we can see that we have test user, test2, and an. Test user, if I type /home/test user, you can see inside that test.txt is actually created. So the user is working properly. Of course, whenever you're done with the user, you type exit, and that exit will take you back to your original shell. Okay, so we added a user, we saw how to switch user, how to use the root user. We took some basic administrative commands. Now what is remaining is basically to clean up what we did. So the first command we are going to use is user del to delete a user. So I'm going to call sudo user del, then test user. This effectively will delete the user, but without deleting the home directory. Okay, so if I type su test user, it will tell me that, by the way, this user does not exist anymore. If I check the password file, again, and grep for test user, it should come empty. Okay, so test user has been removed. Now I cleaned up this user. I can also, of course, remove -rf with sudo, and I want to remove home test user. Okay, so this way our home directory is clean. Then what is next? What is next is basically to disable the root account. Again, the root account, there are multiple opinions whether it should be used or not. In this case, I say stick to the sudo group as much as possible. Only enable the root account if you absolutely need it. Okay. So in this case, how to put everything back when it comes to the root account? All you need to do is use sudo with password, And then what you need to do is to basically provide the dash D, which will delete the password for the user, and then L, which will lock the user account, and then provide root. So in this case, password expiry information has changed for this user, which is root. Now if I try to switch to root again, and I know the password, I'll type the correct password now. It will tell me this password is not correct or authentication failure, but effectively the root user is actually disabled. Of course, the root user, like any other user, exists in the same file in etc password, and then if I grep for root, you can see the root user is here. I think that's it for today's lecture. This is, again, it's just an introductory to the world of administration. The talk about system administration for Linux actually can take many lectures, okay? But this is just to get you started with some of the basics that you might need throughout your journey. Thank you.